About 10:30 p.m. at Ford's Theater, the president, while sitting in his private box with Mrs. Lincoln, Miss Harris, and Major Rathbone, was shot by an assassin who suddenly entered the box and approached behind the president. This detailed and remarkably accurate message, composed only a few hours after the attacks upon Lincoln and the Sewards, was followed with 3 other messages. In one of these, Stanton informed the press that investigators had found a letter among Booth's papers referring to the need to consult with Richmond. Stanton's messages were how the nation first learned of the assassinations and of the suspected role of the Confederate leaders. Charles Dana, one of Stanton's assistant secretaries, later recalled how Stanton dictated and scribbled order after order in Peterson's parlor. It seemed as if Mr. Stanton thought of everything, and there was a great deal to be thought of that night. The extent of the conspiracy was, of course, unknown, and the horrible beginning which had been made naturally led us to suspect the worst. The safety of Washington must be looked after. Commanders all over the country had to be ordered to take extra precautions. The people must be notified of the tragedy. The assassins must be captured. The coolness and clear-headedness of Mr. Stanton under these circumstances were most remarkable. Charles Leal, one of the doctors attending Lincoln, described Stanton during those hours as being, in reality, the acting President of the United States. Others have taken a far darker view of Stanton. Otto Eisenschimel even suggested that Stanton himself organized the assassination of Lincoln. Eisenschimel argued his case against Stanton mainly through questions. Why was there not a better guard for Lincoln at Ford's Theater? Why did Stanton not mention Booth in his first message to the press? Why did Stanton not close the bridge by which Booth left Washington and fled into rural Maryland? Why, when Federal soldiers finally located and surrounded Booth, was he killed rather than captured and questioned? Bill O'Reilly, in his recent best-selling book on Lincoln's death, has raised these questions again. Did Stanton have any part in the assassination of Abraham Lincoln? To this day there are those who believe he did, but nothing has ever been proved. No serious scholar believes that Stanton helped Booth to kill Lincoln. But historians have accused Stanton of many other errors and crimes, ranging from misrepresentations to some of the more shameful injustices in American history. Who was Edwin McMasters Stanton? How did this lifelong Democrat become the Secretary of War for the first Republican president? Why was Stanton so controversial both in his life and after his death? Born on the banks of the Ohio River in Steubenville, Ohio, Stanton attended Kenyon College for 2 years, then studied law with a Steubenville lawyer. He practiced law with increasing success, first in Ohio, then in Pittsburgh, and then in Washington, D.C. By the eve of the Civil War, Stanton was one of the nation's leading lawyers, famed both for his trial work, including the successful defense of a congressman accused of murder, and for his work in the Supreme Court, especially the high-profile challenge to the erection of a bridge at Wheeling, Virginia. Especially during his Ohio years, from roughly 1837 through 1847, Stanton was active in Democratic politics. In private letters he opposed slavery, but he took no public stand on the issue, perhaps because of family connections with the South, perhaps because the Democratic Party was dominated by slave-owning Southern Democrats. When Stanton moved to Washington in 1857, he worked closely with the Democratic Attorney General Jeremiah Black, representing the federal government both in California and in the Supreme Court. In late 1860 and early 1861, as the Southern states seceded and formed their Confederacy, Stanton served 4 months as the Attorney General in the cabinet of Democratic President James Buchanan. Stanton claimed then and later that he served Buchanan only to save the Union, but it is hard to confirm just what Stanton said to Buchanan or what effect he had on Buchanan's actions. When Lincoln became president in early 1861, Stanton returned to his Washington law practice and criticized Lincoln in private letters to Buchanan and others. Stanton also, however, started to do important legal work for members of the Lincoln administration, and in early 1862, when Lincoln needed a Secretary of War to replace Simon Cameron, he chose Stanton. For the next 3 years and 3 months, Stanton worked night and day, raising, arming, feeding, clothing, transporting, and supervising an army of 1 million men. He dealt with issues great and small, and with men and women ranging from the president and governor.